every year after the Oscars happen, there's a lot of chat and talk. The first round of buzz and talk that happens after the Oscars is who were the big winners, who got snubbed, all that kind of conversation. That conversation comes and goes pretty quickly. Then it gets into the next stage of conversation in the ensuing weeks after the Oscars about what do they need to change. That's a favorite conversation of mine every year, is what do they need to change about the Oscars? Well, it sounds like one of the things that the Oscars is looking at is significant rule change that they won't say it out loud, that appears to be directly targeted at Netflix. Because look, there's always been a question, once Netflix kind of became a major player and they started producing and putting out their own, what they label as Netflix original films, debate started about whether Netflix movies should even be considered a part of the Oscars. Now, I get it. There's two very good arguments. On the one side, hey, listen, a movie's a movie. If you're going to bring in directors and actors, you're going to shoot a movie and make it, it should qualify for the Oscars. On the other side, some people will say, hey, television networks have always made movies for their television networks, and those are called made-for-TV movies, and those have always been a part of the Emmys. Why should Netflix be any different? So that's been a debate that's gone back and forth. Now, of course, in recent years, Netflix has found ways to make certain films of theirs do qualify for the Academy Awards, but in a proposed set of changes that the Board of Governors of the Oscars may enact this very month when they meet, could maybe put the fire to Netflix's feet a little bit. Here's the rule change that they're talking about. Okay, so the current rule is this. For a movie to qualify for the Oscars, your movie must play in a movie theater for at least 1 week in one of 6 markets: Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco, Chicago, or Miami, or Atlanta. Now, it should be noted that used to be 2 markets. There was a time when it was like, you got to play your movie for at least 1 week in a movie theater where a paying audience could come and see it, because you couldn't just put it in a private theater. You had to put it in a theater where a paying audience can come see it for at least a week in either LA or New York. That has been expanded to San Francisco, Chicago, Miami, or Atlanta. So all Netflix would have to do, or anybody for that matter, is to take Extraction 2, put it in a movie theater on Sunset Boulevard for 1 week where some people can buy tickets for it, and you can qualify for the Oscars. No fuss, no muss, no problem. Well, that could change, because now, according to these proposed rule changes, they're looking at changing it to this. They're saying now for a movie to qualify for the Oscars, your film must play in theaters in 15 or 20 of the top 50 markets in the US. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be New York, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be LA, but they would, I assume, define what the top 50 markets are in the US, and your movie has got to play in 15 to 20 of those markets. Now, nothing in the official press announcements, nothing in the reports mention Netflix by name, but come on. This is clearly targeted at Netflix. Now, you may say, well, it could also be targeted at, Amazon. It could also be targeted at Apple because they're making movies too. True, but Amazon and Apple have already shown that they want to put their movies in theaters. Apple just announced, we talked about this a couple weeks ago before we took a break. Apple has announced that they are going to commit $1 billion every year to theatrically released films. So they're already on board with it. Amazon has a long history going all the way back to The Big Sick, the Kumail Nanjiani film, which if you have not seen that movie, you're missing out. You got to watch it. It's fantastic. But so they have already shown they're moving towards theatrical. So some people I've seen kind of suggest that maybe this is the Oscars giving the old double effers to Netflix. Or it could be looked at this way. It could be Netflix, or it could be the Oscars and the Academy trying to nudge Netflix on in a direction that they already seem to maybe be moving in. Because we saw with Glass Onion, which Netflix put out in a theatrical release in like 700 screens, that Netflix is experimenting with putting their movies in theaters and seeing how they do. The results they had from Glass Onion was fantastic. For a limited 1 week release only, it did very well. And they noticed that. So this is pretty ballsy and interesting. Look, how would I feel about this? I'm not going to lie to you. I like the rule change. I think it has drawbacks. I do. I think there's legitimate arguments to be made against it. But the fact that this would become a rule that would encourage the producers of these movies to do what is in their own best self-interest anyway, because again, the data has shown that if you want a movie to be successful on your streaming service, put it in theaters first. Your movies will be more successful on your streaming service if you put it in theaters first. The data shows it. It's not opinion. It's fact. It's science. As much as bears and women's menstruations. It's science. It's real, ladies and gentlemen. And so maybe this is just a way of the Oscars and the Academy trying to just nudge these streaming services more towards that, to embrace what is in their own best interests anyway. I know, Chris, this is clearly going to rub... Oh, dear. This is clearly going to rub some people the wrong way.
So sorry for our bear problem here because of me. Shit.
The bears. This is clearly going to rub some people...
Is that why we have a keypad so the bear can't get in? I'm so sorry, you guys. My 4 days awake here is fucking things up.
And there's no cocaine involved. What? I mean, look, this is obviously going to rub some people in Netflix the wrong way. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I expect there to be some pushback and whatever. But in principle, and I'm sure there are drawbacks to this, but in principle, what do you think about this proposal they're making? And what do you see as maybe some of the negative repercussions of it?
I mean, first of all, somewhere Robert Meyer Burnett is just like, yes, put your movies in theaters. I'm right. I kept trying to look up too, because I think also this could affect, indie films as well. I was trying to find out how many theaters To Leslie was in prior to
Andrea's 3?
Yeah. So I was like, how many theaters did that even get to? Because I know in January they did a re-release of, you can go see To Leslie in 6 theaters. Whoa! What? So 6 whole theaters. So I was trying to figure that out because obviously that affects other, indie distributors as well too. But obviously the more people who see your movie, the more potential it has to make money. It just does cost money to get in those theaters, first of all.
Yeah, and you got to have a system in place.
You usually pair up with a larger distributor, and that's why you take things to festivals, so you can find those folks who then invest in your already made film. But for Netflix specifically, it does feel a little bit like a fuck you. It does. But also, I mean, they have been just searching for a lifeline this entire time. How do we make money? How do we make money? We keep putting all this money into our movies that are going directly to streaming. This is the obvious answer of put your movies in theaters. We see how well it works. We saw how many people wanted to go see Glass Onion in a movie theater. And like you were saying, the data does not lie. You get such a bigger return and so much bang for your buck if you do that limited release and then you put it on your streaming service really, really quickly after. It would just be wonderful for them. So I understand these rules. I see why they're doing it, especially because all these streaming services are starting to sweep the Oscars. I mean, we've had so many great films who really have dominated in the award seasons. So I understand it, but also I think it's in Netflix's best interest to just commit and put these movies in theaters. Otherwise, why do you have these $1 million budgets? It makes no sense.
I'm glad you brought up To Leslie, because that could be another angle. Because remember, when they announced that Andrea Riseborough got one of the nominations for Best Actress, a movie that made $27,000 at the box office. You did not mishear that. It was not 27 million. It was not 2.7 million. It was not 270,000. It was $27,000. A lot of people were like, we've never even heard of this film. And all of a sudden, she comes out in order. By the way, I did watch the film, and she effing deserved a nomination. She completely did. But nobody had seen the movie, and so a lot of people were going, wait, what? Who? For what movie? We've never even heard of it. Maybe one of the motivations for the Oscars of trying to maybe implement a rule like this is to avoid a situation like that again in the future. That, hey, if To Leslie's going to qualify, it's got to play in 15 to 20 markets of the top 50 markets. So maybe it's that way to kind of shield themselves from people saying, no one's ever even heard of this. So I don't know, maybe that's the case. Anyway, guys, question is for you. What do you think about this proposed rule change coming from the Oscars? I personally kind of like it. I think it could work. Maybe you see some big drawbacks for it. Whatever you guys think, jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. We want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video,
HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip the trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. And that's why it's America's #1 meal kit. And there's no worries if you're not a pro in the kitchen. HelloFresh's foolproof recipes arrive pre-portioned and easy to prepare in just a few steps. You'll be feeling like Gordon frickin' Ramsay in no time. And guys, look, we're always looking for more ways to save money. HelloFresh is cheaper than grocery shopping and 25% cheaper than takeout. I've told you guys before, Ann and I love using HelloFresh. Not only is it really easy to put together fantastic looking and tasting meals, but it's also a lot of fun, and you get this really great sense of accomplishment when you're looking at this prepared dish that you've made with your own hands. So go to hellofresh.com/Campea50 and use the code Campea50 for 50% off, plus your first box ships free. That's hellofresh.com/Campea50 and using the promo code Campea50 for 50% off your first box ships free. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit.